Hello, everybody, and welcome to Chapter Select, a seasonal podcast where we bounce back and forth between a series exploring its evolution, design, and legacy. For Season 5, we are covering the Resident Evil franchise. I am your host, Max Roberts, and I'm joined, as always, by Logan Moore. Hi, Logan.
Max, I have an important question to ask you before we talk any further about this game, and it is, would you eat the burger that is at the start of this video game? Do you think it looks tasty, or do you think it looks horrible?
It looks like a melted glob, but I would eat it, I think.
I can't tell if that would make... I think that would make for a good burger, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Burgers, they're like a little too uniform and look a little too perfect, where you can see it all segmented in its different parts. Like, I'm thinking like In-N-Out, where you can see the tomato, you can see the patty, you see the cheese, you see the onion, lettuce, and it's like individual parts. I don't think those burgers are as good. Now, when they're like amorphous globs that kind of have just like melted together, those are pretty good burgers, I would say. And that's why Five Guys is better.
I would agree. I think so. It's delicious in that way. Yeah. So thank you, everybody, for listening to our review of cheeseburgers designed by Capcom. Join us on the next episode where we talk about hot dogs. I don't know.
We should actually do a full season on burgers, and we just eat a different burger, bounce back and forth between different restaurant chains, just exploring their evolution, design, and legacy. Or we could just choose a single restaurant chain, and we can bounce back and forth on the numbers on the menu.
On the menu?
So start
like
with a number 1,
number 10, number 2,
to
number 9.
Yep. There you go.
That's
Perfect
not a
season
terrible idea.
You could do that. Taco Bell season is going to be season 6. Get ready.
Oh, jeez.
All right. Resident Evil 2 is on tap, though, this week. We've got a guest joining us for this episode. Ricky Frech will be joining us in just a couple moments, returning Chapter Select alum. But before he gets here, let's run through all of the basic information about RE2. Obviously, to make this clear up front, we have played the remake for this episode. We are going to be analyzing and talking about the remake rather than the original game. That being said, as we do this rundown here, we're also going to talk about the original game and when that came out and all that good stuff. So, per usual, Resident Evil 2 was developed by Capcom. It originally released on PS1, N64, Dreamcast, GameCube, and PC. Not at once, but it rolled out across all those platforms at different times. The remake then came to PS4 and Xbox One PC. It then ended up later coming to Switch via cloud and PS5 and Xbox Series X and S. The original game released on January 21st, 1998, which is actually the day we're recording this, which is January 21st. Kind of cool how that lined up.
Happy 25 years, RE2.
It is 25 years, my goodness. The remake launched on January 25th, 2019. The original game director of RE2 was Hideki Kamiya. The remake game directors were Kazunori Kadoi and Yasuhiro Anpo. The producer of the original game was Shinji Mikami. The remake's producers were Yoshiaki Hirabayashi and Tsuyoshi Kanda. The music in the original was done by Masami Ueda, Shusaki Uchiyama, and Seiyun Nishigaki. And the remake's music was done by Shusaki Uchiyama and Shenlong Kang. Or Gung. I don't know. Kang is kind of... I know it's spelled like Kang, but sometimes with... I know that's... there used to be a baseball player called Jung-Ho Gung, and it was spelled like Kang, like that. It was pronounced Gung. But I think he was Korean. And I don't know if Shenlong Kang or Gung is... I would assume they're Japanese, but I'm not sure. Anywho, the Metacritic score on the original Resident Evil 2 was an 89 out of 100, which there's only 13 reviews for it on Metacritic, so it might not be the best barometer. As for the remake, it has a staggering 91 out of 100 aggregate score, and that's after 85 different reviews from various critics. So no matter how you shake it, this is definitely one of the most lauded and praised entries in the series.
Is your review part of that Metacritic average?
Yeah, it definitely would be. So I contributed to this one. I believe I gave Resident Evil 2 a 9. We could actually find out here within just a few short moments. Yeah, Resident Evil 2, I gave a 9 out of 10, and I said, my stinger quote here says, Resident Evil 2 is likely the single most excellent video game remake ever created, and I'm hard-pressed to think of anything else that could even compare.
There you go, folks. That's Logan's review. Like Logan said, we did play Resident Evil 2 Remake here, and that's what we're going to be talking about. But I do encourage you to look at the previous versions as well. Digital Foundry has a great video that analyzes all of the original ports of this game, from the PS1, GameCube, Dreamcast, to the phenomenal N64 port, which just like shouldn't have even been physically possible.
That was the first one. I remember my dad rented that from Blockbuster at one point and played it, and I tried to watch it, and he was like, "Don't watch me play this game. Leave."
Yeah, the N64 port is mind-blowing that it even exists. So I definitely recommend watching that. There will be a link to that video in the show notes. It's a super insightful deep dive into all the versions of the original Resident Evil 2.
For sure. But as for this episode, we're going to primarily talk about the remake, as we've said. And to that end, let's welcome back to the show for a third time, Ricky Frech. Hey, Ricky, how you doing?
I'm good. How are y'all?
I'm well. In there. Is it a competition between you and Mike to see who can get on the show the most?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I don't know. Stop playing things we don't like, or stop playing things we like, and then you won't have to deal with us, I guess. If that's your goal.
I see if we ever do like a Yakuza season, I feel like you guys will be competing for multiple appearances.
I think if you do a Yakuza season, Mike and I have to take over the podcast and you guys become the guests for a season.
Yeah,
basically. I probably would play the Yakuza games wrong. That's probably what would happen.
Yeah, you would. I assume, knowing what I know about you, I would assume you would do it very poorly.
There's side quests in this game? There's a diaper man?
I know there are side quests in Yakuza because I watch Donkey. You can race your little RC cars and find an emotional plot about the man who owns the RC car place.
That's
true. That goes over like 4 or 5 games too, so.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. They've got some very long-winded storytelling in that series. Okay, we're not talking about Yakuza today. We're talking about Resident Evil 2. Ricky, this is a game that I feel like you and I have talked about at least a fair amount because we used to work together at Dual Shockers when this game released. So you and I have talked about this one with one another quite a bit. What's your own history with RE2, though? Not only with the remake, but also the original game, if you have any history.
So yeah, I do have history. When I was a young child, I guess like a preteen, my cousins and I we'd bring our consoles to each other's houses after Christmas and play whatever game the other person had gotten. So my cousin got the first Resident Evil for GameCube, and if it wasn't your game, you had to print out the guide off the internet back in the day when that was a thing, and then be the guide person and tell the other person what to do. And so we did that, and I got really scared at one part. I believe it was probably the spider part. And so my mom decided I wasn't allowed to play Resident Evil games anymore. So I didn't play anything past 1 until maybe 7. Not because I wasn't allowed, just because I kind of I don't know.
You weren't allowed to play Resident Evil games until you were almost 30.
Yeah. I just fell off, I guess. But what I did do, and this is where my history is weird, I think, is our library had the S.D. Perry novelizations of the Resident Evil series. And so I read all the novels and knew the story before I played the game, which maybe is why I didn't play them until later on, because I had already read what happened and didn't feel like I needed to play them. So I've known the story, and I've read the second book 10 times now, but didn't play it until the remake, which is a weird way to experience Resident Evil, I guess.
Here's my question about the book, and I don't know if you would remember this, but maybe you would since you remember it so much. What's the canon story within Resident Evil 2? Is it Leon showing up to the police station first, or is it Claire? Because both are kind of mixed within the game itself to where there's no one true route within the game, but I assume there is within RE lore.
Yeah, so the way those books are written to make up for the zapping system is it's like omnipresent narrator.
Okay.
So you're going back and forth to them. I don't even think they go to the gas station in the book. I think it starts like Leon goes into the town and it's like a ghost town, and he comes upon somebody that's being eaten by ravens, and then Claire comes out of nowhere, and then they get hit by the truck, and then they have to get to the police station. And there's also, I mean, we don't need to delve too deep into the books. Oh, we could if you want to. But I listened to the first one of these that y'all did for Resident Evil 1. And you were talking about how one of the things I believe you said you kind of liked was that there's no like main villain outside of Umbrella Corp, which is still true in the books, but there is like this overarching, somewhat good person, somewhat bad person named Mr. Trent, who like works for Umbrella. And then as you get, so this was one of the reasons I don't like 4 very much is because the 4th book was written before the 4th game. So it's very different. And it starts to like bring in the Umbrella Corpo CEOs and stuff. It starts to introduce them as real characters. And then they fight them. And they go, the 4th book is actually like, they go to this underground testing facility where they're testing out different new types of bioweapons, and they fight like pterodactyls and mutant rams and all kinds of crap. So the 4th game, when I played it, was just not as intense as the book was.
Well, we talked about it in our Resident Evil 4 episode, but that game's development was obviously all over the place for a couple year span there. So that was probably an idea they had at one point, and then it just got left on the cutting room floor, and then they switched it up, and they're like, let's do Spanish villages instead. So that would make sense that book would come out like that.
They could always bring it back here in the remake.
I hope so. Be way cooler.
They could. Yeah. Max, what's your own history with Resident Evil 2?
I bought the remake on a whim. That I just heard things were very positive about it. So I snagged it just at a GameStop and played through it. And I did Leon first because that was the one character I had recognized and knew from the series. And I was surprised going through the police station. I was like, this is a Metroidvania game. You go through, you get items, you come back, you get more items. The whole world is connected the entire time. You can go anywhere by the end of the game, really.
Had you played 7 at all up to this point?
This was I had played 7 in VR, but I hadn't beaten it. This was the first Resident Evil, and arguably I didn't even beat it because I only did the Leon run. I never went back and did the B run with Claire.
Can I ask how that happened? Because you see the stinger after the credits, and you're just like, oh, I guess this is a thing that...
He right? knew because you were talking to me about this, and you're like, oh, I did the first run. I was like, well, now you got to do the second. I just think you didn't.
I started it, and I think I was just like, this is the same thing, and I moved on to other stuff. We'll talk about it, but it's fairly much the same thing. But I was surprised no one had told me that this was essentially a Metroidvania style like world navigation spooky game, and I really enjoyed my time with it, not enough at the time to obviously like keep going and see everything it had to offer, but I had fun with it. And then now we're back, and we've replayed it for the show all the way through this time for myself. And it's interesting to come back to this game having played others now and seen what the series goes on to offer, where it's come from. And this game, this remake specifically, kind of in the middle of all of that, where the original RE2 was so important, the remake was important, and now kind of I have a better picture of the franchise as a whole, I think, at least so far. And so it's interesting to be back playing it on the new PS5 version as well, which has, new visual features and things like that. Logan, what about you, buddy?
Yeah, for myself, I mean, I've told my Resident Evil story on this podcast already this year, how I had played all of them previously. So I am the sole person here who has played OG Resident Evil 2, but I can't recall... Well, there's a caveat with this. One, I only did one run, so I think I just did Leon's run, and then I never went back and did Claire's, because back in the day, I was like, oh, I think they're just the same. You just choose one character or the other, and you play... that's all there is to it. So I'd only ever done one run of it when I was younger. And not only that, but I think I beat it in a single day, just like a single sitting even. Because that game's like, it's pretty short. It's like 3 hours, I feel like, the original.
Okay.
You can rush through it pretty quickly. And I think I was probably consulting a guide to help me because those games are difficult when I was younger. So yeah, I beat it in like a single. I have a very clear memory of beating that game in like one sitting after school one day and starting it like when I got home from school. And by the time it was like 7 or 8, like I'd beaten it. And I was like, oh, okay, on to Resident Evil 3, I guess. So I had played the original, but it was such a long time ago and it was just one run. Remake, I reviewed back in the day at DualShockers when it came out, gave it very high marks. I think it's excellent. I had never done all 4 runs, so the first time I played, I did Leon's A and Claire is the B. This time I switched it up, did Claire A, Leon B. So now I've seen all 4 different possible permutations of this game. I think this... I don't know. I think this might be the best Resident Evil game post RE7. I don't know.
So like the RE Engine era of Resident Evil?
Yeah, of like this modern revival era of Resident Evil that we're living in. I think this could be the best. And I think that's because it's the most, as a remake, I think this is still so similar to the original games. They really, really kept intact what the games were back 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I guess at this point, geez. And I feel like it really stays true to that formula while modernizing everything else. And I think that's really impressive with this game overall. And then there's just so much else. I mean, we'll get into it here, but I mean, everything with Mr. X. I think some of the storytelling is actually pretty good in this game too, which we can talk about. More so than some of the other Resident Evil games. There's still a lot of good amount of schlock and cheesiness as well. And, but overall, I think that this might be, I don't know if this would be my favorite, but I think objectively speaking, like I don't have many problems with this game. I think it is top notch in a lot of ways. And I think it's one of the best remakes ever, if not the best. Like it's on a very short list of top tier remakes in my opinion, for all of gaming. And I think that's why we played this rather than going back to the original, is because I think it does keep intact, like I said, a lot of what the original Resident Evil 2 did, to where even though we probably, like, if we wanted to really do our whole bounce back and forth, look at the legacy of the series, I think we should have maybe played the original, but this remake is so good and stays true to the initial Resident Evil 2 that I think I think that this was a good choice for us to play this one. What do you guys think? Ricky, I guess, where do you land? Because I know you've played all of these games as well. I don't know if you're in line with me thinking this is one of the best in the series, especially in the more modern era, or what?
Yeah, this would be my number 3 overall, behind Village and the first one. I think Village is the best one they've ever made, but I don't know if, like, objectively I could say that. I just think I like how dumb it is.
Yeah, that's my thing with Village too. Yeah. So, Max, what about yourself? At least within the ones we've played so far this season, and what do you think about the game overall?
I can't speak to the original, right? I don't have any context for it, but I appreciate the modernization that this game has. It's a lot of the stuff introduced in RE7, which makes sense with the new engine and just design and things. But this game is so good at immersing you in the environment with its sound and mechanics. It's all there. As little friction as possible with some of the mechanic stuff, like something we've complained about in the past with the old games, like the maps. And just they're not as useful as they could be. And this game, that's completely removed, with doors being labeled as soon as you try to interact with them. And knowing where keys go and just item management, it keeps in touch with some of the old stuff that you would see in like Resident Evil 1 or 0, needing to use the item box, moving things, expanding your inventory, solving puzzles that way. What do I carry? What do I sacrifice? It's the same decisions, just completely modernized. So it does capture the spirit of at least what I'm familiar with the old games, but it makes it look pretty. It sounds great. It plays great. It's just a really rock solid game. I see why it was received so well. It's praised so much, and why it's still popular to, this day, being out, I guess now for 3 or 4 years now for just the remake. It's still a bar that they strive for, it seems. And I think looking at things like Resident Evil 4 Remake, I think that idea, that spirit of capturing the original while inventing some new things, I can see it in the remake that's getting ready to come out, and I think this stems from that. This is a very important game in the series as a bridge in the modern era.
I want to stay with you, Max, because
Okay.
I think, again, Ricky and I have talked about this game a good amount, so I kind of know where Ricky and I stand on this in some aspects. I think just from our pre-show conversation that we had briefly about the game, I think you have more problems that you haven't let on with this game, and I'm kind of curious what those might be, and we can use maybe some of your criticism as jumping off points for more specific aspects of the game here.
Okay. That's good. That's a good idea. I think my biggest one is one that we hinted at actually earlier talking about my story with this game, and I've really fully realized here, having played it all the way through this time, is I think the world is not as interconnected between the two playthroughs as they would want you to believe or feel. It is largely the same game, both playthroughs. It doesn't feel like a double campaign that pays off necessarily. I don't think you learn enough playing one or the other or see the interaction of the worlds. Like this time around, I did Claire first and then Leon. And like as I'm playing through as Leon, there were very few things that Claire had done that impacted the world. These are supposed to be events going on concurrently, and it doesn't feel that way. You're doing the same puzzles. You're doing, where Claire would have cleared the way, that's not clear for Leon. Or you fight the same bosses. You do the same boss fight in the same spaces, even though Claire theoretically just knocked down is it the G thing?
William Birkin.
Just Birkin.
Yeah.
I didn't know what the monster's name was, but
just call him Birkin. Yeah.
Claire knocks Birkin down and he falls, and then Leon shows up and pushes through the same bookcase, and there's Birkin again, and we have him fall again. Like it just doesn't feel cohesive. Like the two sides are acknowledging each other really all that much. You do. And Mr. X doesn't really show up in Claire's run all that much. So it just feels...
Which run? You mean if it's the A run or the B run?
I guess the A run. The A run of Claire doesn't have a ton of Mr. X. I suppose that might be different in her B run.
Or he doesn't show
have
up
a lot.
Yeah, because once you escape the orphanage with Sherry, Birkin comes in and kind of slashes him up or whatever. Yeah.
Yes, slices him in half. It just...
Yeah.
The two halves feel disjointed, which I was a little surprised at this time, like fully playing the game this time around. It didn't really show me why it was worth having this game be a 2 playthrough type of game.
That's been you can go read my review right now from 4 years ago, and I think I mentioned the exact same thing. I think that is the game's biggest problem. Is that it just does not feel cohesive between the two campaigns, and you're doing the same things, and I got to collect 3 medallions, and I got to blow up this wall, and I got to do, like, you are doing the same tasks for the most part. Obviously, there are differences with, Claire's whole story with Sherry, and then Ada Wong showing up in Leon's campaign. Like, those are the two main differences, and things do start to change a bit, like when you get into the sewers and but you're still doing the same puzzles, even things like, I guess this would make sense, but like the locker codes remain static across both of the playthroughs and things like that. Like
that feels fine. It's more, why aren't the lockers already open? I wish there was some sort of save file recognition. Like if I had opened this in the past, why isn't it open in the playthrough? Or
it's just Logan, have you played Code Veronica?
I have, but it's been 15 to 18 years.
Because what you guys are describing, what you guys are describing is what happens in Code Veronica. Not to like spoil a later podcast, but if you leave stuff behind as Claire, when you come back through as Chris, so you can make Chris's run easier by making Claire's run harder and vice versa. So, and obviously like that game,
that's interesting.
That game came after too, right? So
yeah,
I guess part of it is like the original 2 maybe couldn't have done that kind of stuff. Maybe, I mean, I don't know. And then you get Code Veronica, they do that stuff. And now we're in a remake and it's like, do you want them to remake it more faithfully or do you want it to be a more cohesive game? I don't really know what the answer to that is. I just know, like, I think it's worth saying that they do figure this out later.
Yeah.
And they do it the way you guys want it to be done.
Well, they largely just, after Code Veronica, they also pretty much drop dual campaigns as a whole. Like, I don't think that's a thing.
Yeah.
Like 4 or 5. I mean, I guess 6 wouldn't be dual campaigns. They're just 4 individual campaigns instead that are their own things that don't really cross over.
They just made the campaigns co-op, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, besides 4, obviously.
Yeah. That's my main issue with the game, for sure, Max. So we're in agreement on that for certain. I'd say a good 60 to 75% of the campaigns are similar, because there are differences. Again, like there are different set pieces, there are different sections where you're controlling Sherry and you're trying to escape the orphanage, or you're controlling Ada running through the sewers, and none of those last very long or anything like that. But there are differences, and some of the puzzles do get a little bit mixed up. Like I'm thinking of like the chess puzzle is different in both of the campaigns.
The chess puzzle is different, but I appreciate it being different from a gameplay perspective, but from a world building perspective, why is the electricity just entirely different the second time around? Like there's
I've just never understood like how they explain from a story perspective how Claire or Leon, whoever is the character you're not playing as, how they get down into the lab and things like that. Because the explanation would be, oh, well, you saw how via their playthrough. It's like, well, I guess, but also they don't really ever cross over and they're doing the same tasks like we're saying. So it is a weird thing, and it's just something you have to sort of put out of your mind for the most part. I imagine like that's kind of how I view it. Like they're not going to tell a single cohesive story, but you get what they're going for and you understand broadly like what is happening. That's why I asked Ricky though, like what the book's canon through line was it?
Well, so the way I've always viewed it is that it's like an alternate history, the second playthrough. Like it's not necessarily they're supposed to be happening at the same time.
Yeah.
Because in the books, you do have like Leon, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe Leon does more fights with Mr. X just like he does in the game.
Yeah.
And so they don't ever fight the same bosses, obviously. But they are like, they're hitting the same beats, and you have more of the Birkin stuff happening with Claire, obviously because of who she teams up with later with Sherry. And then Leon's kind of like the mercenary side with Mr. X and Ada Wong. So it's definitely like, I don't know, that I think maybe helped me think of it as like 2 alternate histories, because in my mind, Leon never fights Birkin, right? So
that's kind of how I've always viewed it too. Like I create my own sort of, I've always had a canon in my mind. Like Leon's the one who gets to the police station. He's the one who's running around the police station dealing with Mr. X and because it just makes more sense narratively for him to be the one going through the station, because he's the rookie cop, and I'm supposed to. He was going to the police station anyway. Having Claire be the one that gets in there and is interacting with what's the guy's name who's bitten?
Marvin.
Yeah, Marvin. Like that stuff just doesn't make as much sense narratively.
No.
It makes far more sense for Leon to show up and be like, "Hi, I'm the rookie cop who was supposed to come here," and for him to have those connections and things like that. Story stuff. Actually, let's stick with this story because I know we're largely talking about it, and I mentioned this before. I do think there are some strong storytelling elements of this remake in particular. It just depends though, because there are some weak parts too. I think everything with Ada and Leon doesn't really work super well in this game. Maybe you guys feel differently about that, but it comes off. I don't know. What did you guys think about their through line in the game?
I'm just confused most of the time. Like, how does Ada survive the fall? Why?
Because it's Resident Evil.
Okay, sure.
How does Chris punch a boulder? You just go with it.
The strength of Chris. There's like this fake romance there, but then Leon is so easily manipulated into not believing Ada just at the mention of an evil scientist lady. So like their whole trust, it just feels very goofy movie type energy where it's, we're in love, we're rivals, we're in love, I've fallen. I don't really know Ada's angle. Honestly, I didn't know Ada like works for Wesker until I played 4.
She's a mercenary, so she just kind of does what
I guess
she gets hired. So
really, I just kind of believe she was an FBI agent the very first time I played this a couple of years ago. Their relationship strikes me as goofy in this game.
As a noted Leon hater, I could care less. Claire's story's way better.
Yeah, I think Claire's story has a little bit more of an emotional punch just because it involves Sherry and there's a family dynamic there. I will say Sherry's pretty flippant about everything that's going on in her family, and she doesn't seem too torn up that her dad's a big old monster and her mom's a evil scientist. Like, you get to the end of the game and she's like, wow, Leon and Claire, you guys should adopt me. We could become a big family. It's like, homegirl, your parents are dead. They just blew up. Like, you're not torn up about that at all. Like, she just rolls with the punches in this game.
To be fair, her parents kind of suck.
That's true.
They're very bad parents. Maybe she just doesn't like them.
It's true. They are very bad parents. But
I didn't care for Sherry all that much.
Well, guess what? She shows back up in Resident Evil 6.
She does not.
Yeah.
Yes, she does.
I think she's in the campaign with Wesker's son.
Oh my god.
I believe that is correct.
Oh, okay. I'm buckling up for that. It felt fine, I guess. Playing as Sherry was worse than playing as Ada. Ada's actually capable of doing some stuff.
Oh, really?
Well, Sherry just is all child sneakiness, and that like orphanage puzzle of he's got to move stuff out of the way. You have to basically.
You do have to wait. That is like a creepy set piece, though, because it's like a pervert.
I didn't find it creepy. I found it annoying. I mean, thematically, yes, it's creepy, but mechanically, I found it annoying. Like,
because you have to wait for him to maneuver his way around the room. Like, it is kind of drawn out just a bit. I get that, but the set piece itself is solid. Ada's is just, I'm going to turn on some electronics with my little gizmo. And so, and then you got to dodge Mr. X, who comes out of nowhere.
Good old Mr. X.
Which we'll talk more about him, I assume, as later on. The one thing, when I say that there's strong storytelling in this, though, I do think a lot of the side character performances are pretty good, though. Most of the main cast isn't that great. The brief 90-second to 2-minute cutscene with Kendo is really good, I think, and it takes a second to show how the outbreak is actually impacting people who live in the city, which I really like, because a lot of times all you ever really see in this game is the main cast, evil umbrella people, evil humans or whatever, like the cop, the police chief in this game. Like, everybody you're running across is pretty binary. They're either very evil or very good, except for, I guess, Ada is kind of like in the middle. And so you never really meet just everyday people that are getting messed up as a result of what Umbrella has caused. And so I think that's one of the standout moments in this entire game, is just that 2-minute cutscene with Kendo and his daughter and him having to put her down. It's pretty impactful, for especially just coming out of nowhere largely.
Mm-hmm.
I liked it. I like there's a letter from Jill there, which is new.
I think that's added later. Yeah, I think that was added via an update afterward.
So I like that. It ties to the world. I did not play it, but correct me if I'm wrong, there is an optional mission with Kendo, right? One of the extra gameplay modes.
That was one of the DLCs that they added
things
afterward.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I like Kendo's inclusion. I was trying to think, like, who does Claire run into that's impacted? I suppose Brian Chief Irons, but he's a villain, not really.
Yeah.
There's no sympathy there. He's just a creepy taxidermist / I'm gonna kill people and stuff them with whatever taxidermist stuff.
That's still, I was gonna say, that's still taxidermy.
It is. I don't know what do you fluff them up? Is it like a stuffed bear?
Let's not say that, maybe.
So
yeah, it's like the stuff from Build-A-Bear.
You just like
just grab that hose
them.
and you just fill it in.
Mm-hmm. It's just a poof. But who else? Claire doesn't really run into anyone else, does she?
Not that I remember. I think she has a larger connection with what's Lady Birkin's name? Annette, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, she has a larger crossover with Annette and her campaign, at least briefly.
Especially toward the end.
Yeah, when she's trying to save Sherry because Sherry's become infected. So she has a little bit more crossover with her, and then Chief Irons, and that's about it, I think.
Do you even see Chief Irons as Leon?
No, I don't believe so.
You can't get into his office or anything because you never get the heart key or diamond key.
You find some like files that mention him, I believe, but that's about it.
Speaking of files, I think the environmental storytelling and like the item pickup world building is great across both playthroughs because it does flesh out Chief Irons' creepy nature, but also the scientists in the Umbrella Lab, like the whole world. The environmental storytelling down in the lab, I think, is awesome. The vine creatures' growth and expansion down there. The one scientist who you have to get the ID bracelet for to, I think, level 2 or 3 or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you go back and use the modulator to open that up to get the last item expansion slots, like his zombie's in there and he has a note talking about how he's a genius and he'll never die, and there he is dead. So I think there's cool world building and storytelling and fleshing out those characters that you obviously never really interact
especially
with.
I mean, we mentioned Chief Irons, but I think it's cool you can find notes, because initially if you don't read any of the extra files or notes that you come across, you kind of wonder, like, why is the police chief this evil dude? Like, why is he doing this? And you can find files that obviously flesh out that he's like on Umbrella's payroll, and he's being paid to keep tabs on Sherry, and he's working for them while also being the police chief. So he's been paid off and stuff like that. So like certain motivations of characters you wouldn't really understand unless you do that stuff. I agree. That's, I think, consistent across all the Resident Evil games, though. I think it's one of the few franchises where when I do pick up collectibles, I do actually read them to further understand what's happening, because they're usually never too long, and they do a great job of filling in the gaps with the narrative stuff. We've talked a lot about storytelling, probably far more than I anticipated we would, if I'm going to be honest. Let's start digging into gameplay a little bit more, and let's just talk about world design, because I think that is this game's strongest point. The police station is obviously the best area in this game, I think, by far. The lab and the lab's far more linear, and the sewers are, I don't know, the sewers are okay, but the police station itself is, I think, fantastic. That's like probably, I don't know, I think the police station could be, especially with how it's seen in this remake, could be the best area in any of the Resident Evil games, especially based on what we've played so far this season, Max. I don't know how you guys feel about the different areas in this game. I assume we're all hot on the station itself, though.
Yeah, I think, like, I was kind of struggling with you saying it's the best of the series, but I guess I'll skip past that because I think the Spencer Mansion is probably still better. But I know y'all don't like that very much from what I heard last time.
I like the Spencer Mansion. It's just, If there was a map that was as intuitive as the one in Remake here, then I think that would
it's
help.
in your brain. You just put it in here and then you got it. That's all you need.
No, doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I do think the police station's really cool. Like Max was saying earlier about it being like semi-Metroidvania. That's the most fun puzzle in the Resident Evil games for me. Is like, I'm in this safe room. I know Mr. X is above me. I need to make it to this certain place with enough weapons or enough room in my inventory to be able to pick stuff up. How do I do that without dying? Like, that is the best like puzzle the series has, right? And I think that because of Mr. X and the police station, that all comes together. I don't know if that's maybe why I think like the Spencer Mansion is a cooler place, because a lot of the police station being cool is because of Mr. X being cool. You know what I mean?
I agree. Because I felt that way playing through as Claire, because Mr. X doesn't really, he shows up still, but not as early. And so that kind of, it did make my playthrough with Claire a bit more antsy because I had previously done the Leon A run. So I was like, when is Mr. X going to show up? Like, I'm tiptoeing through the place, and eventually he shows up. The police station, at least this remake incarnation, I can't speak to the original, fixes the problem I had with Spencer Mansion. It just unique identifiable spaces outside of the map, actually being functional and useful because it's just a modern game. The police station is memorable in the sense of it used to be an art museum, but now it's a police station. So there's this strange mashup of architecture and room design. There's the offices for the stations and the armory, but then there's the showers, and then there's this room with old art and a library. Like, each room fits because of this mishmash cohesion of police station and art museum, but also just these rooms stand out, and it's so much fun to navigate and figure out. And eventually you have the whole main area of the police station mapped out in your mind, and you're running through it. You're blazing. Mr. X is on your tail. You're like, I need to get over here. It's like what you were saying, Ricky. How do I get to this room or get to this space optimally while having room for the items I need without being attacked? And then Mr. X shows up and throws your whole route off. And I had a scenario where, it's funny, I was testing a note you pick up, says the lickers, right? That's what they're called?
Mm-hmm.
The lickers can't see you. They don't have eyes. They only listen. So I was testing that in my Leon run of the game. And so I'm like creeping past them. And so that first hallway down to the left where the licker shows up, I snuck past. Now, immediately kind of around the corner in that hallway is the Clover door, which eventually is where you get the jack for the bookshelf in the library. But because I was sneaking past the licker, I never interacted with the door, thus not marking it on my map. And later on, I'm looking for the jack, and I couldn't remember where it was. And so I didn't realize I needed to go check there. But upon my return, having looked it up, I was like, of course, it's the one room, the door I didn't touch because there was a licker right there. I didn't kill the licker, so it's still there. There's still zombies in the hallway. And who shows up? Mr. X. And it just turned, I might have the footage for it, but it turned into this mad chase of Leon with very little health. Mr. X is like pushing all the enemies out of the way, but they're getting back up trying to kill me. I'm running in this tiny room trying to pick things up. He's punching me. I'm just trying to run away with this jack and get to the library where at least I have more room. And so it creates this dynamic play space when all of the elements are coming together and you know the map. Because then you're like, well, I can get to the library by going down this hallway, or I can ditch Mr. X by cutting through here and taking the long way around. And so it's a great location. The police station in particular is just awesome to explore and run around in.
Yeah.
We've talked, obviously, a lot about Mr. X. I mean, we may as well have a larger conversation about him because he is the standout. I feel like I'm restating all my things I wrote in my review 4 years ago, which is kind of funny. But a lot of what I said, that is one of the reviews. A lot of times I'll write reviews for games and then 6 months or a couple years later, time goes by and I look back, I'm like, I would say different things about this game, I think. This is like one of the few games where like what I thought of it back then, I think largely holds true to where I'm at now. And Mr. X really is the star of the show in this game, for sure. And I think, yeah, what's so great about him is just the game is already, I don't want to say difficult or hard, but you've already got enough going through your head when it comes to trying to keep track of where certain items are at and what your overall goal is. Okay, I need to get these medallions. Okay, I need to blow up this hole in the wall. I need to do this. And so you're trying to map out in your mind how to get around the police station and where you need to go and what areas you haven't explored yet. And at the perfect time in this game, at least in the definitely with Leon's more so than Claire, they do drop Mr. X, and it just completely changes how you view your objectives within the police station, because then now all of a sudden where you were starting to feel pretty comfortable and you had started pathing out how to get around this area, now you have to reroute yourself. And in the area, in the police station is so interconnected that there are so many different routes you can take to get from point A to point B. And that's what's awesome, is that Mr. X might be in your way, but you can go around, but it's going to take more time. And even then, you don't know if he's going to path somewhere himself that will end up within the new path that you're trying to take to go around him. And so it just adds this constant stress and stress and angst more than anything, because when you actually do see him and run into him, he's not like horrifying. It's more just fear of dying. Like, he's not a jump scare enemy, really. He's not a like it's a different kind of horror, which I really like in this game. It's just a constant sense of dread. Yes. Because you can hear his footsteps and you're worried about dying and you're trying to keep your health up. And yeah, even when you come across him, there's never like a jump scare moment or you're shaking uncontrollably because you're so frightened to come face to face with him. It's just like, oh, this guy's giving me fits. I hate him. And so that's what's great about him, is it's a different type of horror, I think, that this series has not really done. I don't want to say they've never done, because they've obviously repeated this sort of thing a lot with Jack in Resident Evil 7, Lady D in Resident Evil 8, Nemesis to some degree, I would say, more so in the original Resident Evil 3 than the remake. But yeah, it's Mr. X is phenomenal, and it's easily the best part of the game. And I think it makes Leon's campaign the better of the two, for sure, that he just remains this unstoppable force that doesn't go away until you finally have to get stuck with him on a elevator platform and you have to have one final battle with him to finally get this guy out of the way. And I think that's great, because especially, and I'm talking about the end of the game when you're trying to run away, but the moment in Leon's campaign when when the timer's going and he busts through the door and Leon's like, oh my God, this guy again? Like, he's been chasing you for hours at this point, and he just is still there and he's not stopping. It makes for a great through line. And he shows up everywhere. Again, in Leon's campaign specifically, like you're in the lab and you destroy all the plants and you're like, okay, cool, I can get this thing. And then boom, he comes out of nowhere. You're like, oh my God, again, are you serious? Like, he just shows up everywhere when you least expect him a lot of times. And it's even outside of the police station, he's easily the best part of the game, I think.
Mr. X is iconic. You know, he has this undeniable design and presence, from the bowler hat to the trench coat to the thud of his footsteps, his name, his brute strength.
Where does the name actually come from? Sorry to cut you off, because it's never said in the game itself. He's just referred to as Tyrant. Is this I didn't know if Ricky would know if the.
I want to say it's file you read somewhere, but I could be wrong. That could be incorrect.
I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember reading anything in the game that explicitly said Mr. X. Anytime you find anything that references him, I thought it just referred to him as Tyrant. So,
according to the Resident Evil fandom wiki, one of the nicknames used in licensed materials is Mr. X, a name never used in Resident Evil 2 itself. It is possible the name was a result of a mistake on Capcom USA's part. Early concept art of T-00 to licensees was known as Tyrant X.
okay.
So it sounds like it was a name that just has kind of survived through copyright. It's later used in like comics and magazines, and there's even a mention apparently in Resident Evil Resistance. So it seems like it's a name that has survived from the early concept phases of it, and it's just stuck with the
Fans
character.
have just latched onto it. It's a better name than Tyrant, especially because Tyrant, when you say Tyrant, I think of original Resident Evil and the final boss in that game. So yeah, Mr. X is just a much better name. Sorry to cut you off.
No, you're totally fine. It is a better name. It also gave birth to arguably one of the greatest memes, at least certainly in Resident Evil, which is modding the game with, X gonna give it to you when Mr. X bursts through the wall or something. Like, there's something undeniable about this monster. And especially in Leon's campaign, where he is the constant instead of Birkin, just shows up. And it's so much fun. And once you get over that initial fear of him, it really does become just a puzzle to solve and move around. His footsteps are more scary than his actual physical presence. He's just a blast. I will say he is a bit, at least in the police station initially, he's a bit easy to just leave behind. I think specifically back to that library scene, like where you got to jack and move the bookcases and stuff, you can just run circles, and like he never really strays from following you directly. It's only when he shows up out of nowhere and then you're reacting instead of leading him where it can get a little nutty. So, but if you have him in a solid pursuit, he's not really that big of an issue. He's more of a nuisance at that point. Which is a bit of a downer. He doesn't surprise as much once you're familiar with him. Then the surprises come back again later when you're in the greenhouse or when you're in the lab trying to escape. But that's more amplified because of the nature of those set pieces, and it's the end of the game. So
the thing about this game that freaks me out with him, sorry to cut you off, is that in the original Resident Evil 2, obviously with the set cameras and stuff, you can see him when he's coming after you at times, so you can kind of maneuver a little bit better. Because this is a third-person game, though, when you are running from him, you obviously cannot see behind you unless you, I guess, could you turn the camera and run towards the camera, I guess? Well,
I feel like that'd be very dangerous.
But then you can't see where you're going, and there could be zombies in front of you and stuff like that. Yeah, so you can't see him a lot of times when you directly come into contact with him, and that's what freaks me out the most, is just hearing the footsteps. And the sound design in this game is immaculate. Like, it is so good. I think that's partially why he is as good as he is in this game, and it is because the sound design is off the charts.
Right.
And yeah, just not being able to, again, he's not that scary when you come across him, but running from him and just knowing that he's behind you and you don't know if you're outrunning him a lot or if he is gaining on you, that creates that stress, and that's the fear part of it, I guess.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say, was that it feels, you can definitely tell they've played Outlast, which is that's like a constant thing where people are chasing you and you don't know if they're right behind you or if you have some time, but you just have to like make a choice which way you're going to go. And if you're wrong, you're probably going to be dead and you have to start over. And that's the same feeling I get where like the hair's up on the back of my neck and I'm like sweating and cursing and hoping he doesn't get me. So it definitely is like, oh, these guys played a lot of Outlast before they made this game, even though they're very different games. That's a first person game, a lot more gross.
I wanted to come to you real quick, Ricky, because I mentioned that I think Mr. X's presence in Leon's campaign makes his the better of the two, and you kind of made a face at that in turn. So you think Claire's is the better of the two campaigns, I assume?
I think, yes. I think Claire has more fun guns to play with.
Yeah.
I think Claire's side story with Sherry is much better than Leon's with Ada. I think that I actually care about Claire, and I don't like Leon. I've never liked Leon. And so that's part of it too. I will admit there's like a definite bias there. But yes, I think like that's one of the ways that it's like so wild to me that Max didn't play Claire B, because to me, Claire's run is the run, right? Like that is the one you should play every time. And so I always start Claire A and then go Leon B. Did the opposite this time. And I was like, oh, there's less Mr. X here, but it's still like the story's way better. I'm having more fun shooting people. I get a grenade launcher.
Well, like, let's talk about the weapons. Because I do agree Claire has many better weapons, because she's got the grenade launcher, she's got the SMG as well, she's got the standard,
she's got the quick draw.
Yeah, she's got the pistol,
the electric thing.
Yeah, the electric
spark plug,
yes.
Spark bolt.
She's got way more unique weapons in hers, whereas Leon's is more two pistol variants, which is a little bit odd. One which he just holds like a pistol, then when he turns sideways, like he's a
kill shot.
Yeah, kill shot. There's a shotgun, which feels great. I mean, shotguns in Resident Evil are always excellent. So that might be the best feeling gun in the game, to just pop a zombie's head with that right away. But the grenade launcher and the SMG stuff is a little bit more unique for sure.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the grenade launcher. I like it better than the shotgun. The shotgun does not light people on fire. So that's a letdown in my book.
Doesn't Leon eventually gets a flamethrower though, so at least you can catch people on fire in his place.
Yeah,
eventually.
but
I don't think the flamethrower is very good.
Yeah, no, I don't like it.
It's certainly not as exciting as the stuff that Claire is getting. They all feel good. They're all fun. They just didn't strike me as. Maybe it's just a Resident Evil staple at this point. I'm just getting familiar with it. This is our 4th episode, so maybe I'm just feeling some sort of weapon complacency with the same stuff every game. But I'm not. The most exciting gun to get was the spark plug shooting thing, because it was new to me, because I didn't do Claire last time, so I never got that gun before. So that. It didn't feel as inventive, and Leon getting that one pistol that you just collect parts for and keep upgrading it, that was actually really disappointing, because it was an extra pistol. Like I would have rather had different weapon variety or something there.
I mean, most of the staples are what? Standard pistol, there's a mag, there's a shotgun. There's a grenade launcher. Those are the big ones I can think of, and then there's usually some other more unique things around those. If you want unique weapons, I'd say 5 has some more unique stuff, because isn't there a bow in that game that you can unlock or something like that?
You might be right. I can't remember. It's been a long time since I played 5.
It's been a long time since I played 5 too, so I could be completely speaking nonsense there, but I think you can. But yeah, I feel like there's way more unique weapons in 5 from what I remember. But again, that's much more of an action focused game. So
yeah. I will say, one thing I will say about the weapons is it could just be my play style too, because having the because basically what I do is I walk into a room, if there's a zombie in there, I shoot it in the knee until it can't walk anymore, and then I consider that zombie dealt with, and then I don't like kill it, I just run past it. So having the SMG that can just like take out their knees real fast makes it like perfect for me the way I play.
SMG is definitely, you got to learn how to use the SMG, and it really is to just handicap the zombies more so than trying to shoot them in the heads or whatever, because it's not great for that at all by any means.
What did you guys think of the sub weapons, the grenades, the knife, being A, equipable between the three of them, like only one equipped at a time, and B, the whole, if you're grabbed, you can use one of them to get the creature off of you. What did you think of that system? Because I don't think I've seen that in any of the games we've played so far.
I like it. I use it a lot where if I know like, oh, I have a flashbang, I'll just get bitten because I don't have a lot of ammo. So I like being able to use it tactically when I'm out of ammo to just like take out a room and get cleared out. So I think it's a good system. I don't know. I don't really use a lot of like throwing the grenades at people. I only use it as like a defensive thing.
I'd say that's how I primarily use it too. At the time we're recording this, I'm playing through RE3, which we'll talk about eventually later in the season as well. And that's not in that game. And I don't really understand why, because I do like its inclusion here.
Do you think it's because of the dodge roll that Jill has?
Might be because of the dodge roll. I think the knife also does not. The knife in RE3 does not have a have like a what is it called? Like it doesn't
Like
get
a
destroyed.
stamina, yeah.
Yeah, there's a name for that.
Weapon durability?
Yeah, a durability bar. That's what I was thinking. Thank you. Yeah, so the knife cannot get destroyed in RE3, but still you can't even do it with the grenades or the flashbangs or the grenades, which was kind of disappointing. I definitely like that far more in RE2. It's a little bit more forgivable in that sense. But then again, RE3 is a little bit more action heavy, I guess. So they're kind of trying to encourage you to fire guns. So
we once again prove that I play these games differently than you. I'm using these sub weapons proactively instead of reactively. I'm not trying to get grabbed and use them to push off. I'm throwing grenades into groups or flashbangs to stun them so I can maneuver out of a sticky situation.
I definitely do that as well, but there are some enemy types in the game. Like I think of the mutated whatever the heck they are in the sewers that can...
The G adults?
The big globby gloop things?
Yes. Yeah, whatever those are. I think of those as ones that I would use my sub-weapons on quite a bit to get them off of me. Standard zombies, sometimes if they were getting on me and I had a frag grenade on me, for instance, and I wanted to save that and use it for later, I would just let them bite me and shove them off and then keep going, because I would use the grenade at times on bosses and whatnot, or to just flashbangs if there's a lot in a certain area, just clear the way and keep running. So I would use it as a mix of both, I would say. We've talked a lot about the weapons, and I think kind of going along with that, we could talk about the bosses in this game, which we've also touched on a little bit. How do you guys feel about the bosses in the game? There's only two, but you do fight them in multiple instances. There's the Birkin fight in the basement area. There's the Birkin fight on the platform where you blast him off. And then there's the two different bosses at the ending. Then there's the final Birkin. I don't know. The Birkin fight where you run into a net and she freezes him, and then you go down in the center area and you fight him there. And then there's the final fights for both Claire and Leon. And then the final fight itself, which is, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
With all those taken into account, how do you guys feel about the bosses in this game? And
I like almost every Birkin fight. I think the Mr. X fight is kind of whatever, because it's just like dodge him until Ada randomly comes back to life and throws you a rocket launcher. Although I will say, if you could just shoot him once and you get to keep a couple rockets, the next part where all those zombies come out and you can just blow them up is very satisfying.
Yes,
so
I did that.
I was able to pull that off and get the trophy for that one, like beating him with 5 minutes.
I did that too. I tucked away all my mag ammo for that fight, and I'm like, I'm going to try to get this trophy. So I think I had like 20 mag shots when I fought Mr. X. I just unloaded.
Again, we just play very differently. I'm not a fan of Birkin. He feels so samey every time. It's shoot the shoulder, shoot the eye, shoot the shoulder, shoot the eye, which is the same thing as the gloopy goblin sewer monsters. Shoot the eye, shoot the shoulder. And then Mr. X feels more like an endurance boss fight rather than like I'm succeeding and deteriorating something. I don't know. It's just how long can you last until you get a rocket launcher? So,
well, you have to deal damage to him. It's not based on
you do,
timing
but
or whatever.
You do, but it's also, they feel cool. They're very epic and grand, especially the later ones in the game. But nothing felt particularly challenging or inventive, or like I had to come up with something. That fight with Birkin in the center of the lab, they give you so many items there that you're never short of anything you could possibly need. It's just, they're not tough. And I played the game on normal both times. They didn't jump up to hardcore or anything like that. I wasn't pursuing the platinum this time around. But there's such a lack of variety, and there's not even really sub bosses or anything like that. The closest, I guess, is the alligator, but that's just...
what are you talking about?
That's fun.
That's a Crash Bandicoot level.
He gives a great one-liner after he kills it, but I forget what he says.
I forget too. But
I think he might just say like "die you effer" or something like that, like, and then blows it up.
But that's not a boss fight. That's, like I said, a Crash Bandicoot level. I'm surprised, Logan, you even care for that.
Well, most Crash Bandicoot levels don't end up with alligators exploding into 1,000 pieces. So
if only they did.
So I was actually pretty bummed out by the boss fights and variety in this game.
I think the boss fights visually and set piece wise are almost always pretty cool. I really like being chased down around in a maze with Birkin the first time you encounter him. I love crashing the crane into him. I think that's a cool idea.
That's a bad fight. That's a bad fight.
Why is it a bad fight?
Because it's so just cumbersome, and he can get up so fast and then walk over to you after you've already initiated the swing, and then if you're
Max is just saying he's bad.
Max, yeah, I think you're tattling on yourself, because I would just blast him down and immediately press the thing, and then it would hit him.
No, I would hit him. He'd fall to his knees. I'd go push the button, and then he'd get up and walk out of the way, and then you're trapped. You either get hit by the thing or I
played this boss fight played that boss fight twice between both campaigns. Never had that happen once. Bad gamer. You're ratting on yourself.
It's not a fun fight at all. That crane thing's so slow. I think
it's unique for sure.
You have to do it twice. Also,
no, you don't. Like, there's a trophy to do it once.
Hit it once?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can do it.
What's the difference? What are you doing differently?
You just have to deal more damage to him.
Yeah.
The crane deals damage to him. And so once you get him his health below a certain threshold, that knocks him off. You don't have to do the crane twice.
I don't like that at all. That's terrible.
Bad gamer, ratting on himself. Bad gamer.
What are you doing damage to him with?
A gun.
With your guns.
Like with everything else.
With your guns, with your grenades, with everything that it gives you. Yeah, if you knock him down, you just keep blasting him for a little bit.
Yeah, I don't like that fight at all.
I thought that fight's fun. And then I do really like the final tyrant fight. It is not... it's very straightforward. You're just unloading everything you have at him because it's the end of the game by that point. So there's really nothing to it. But I like that it is the final standoff with this dude that has been chasing you the whole time. You think he's actually finally dead. You don't I didn't really think it. But he blows up or whatever, and then you're running away, and you get down the elevator, and he blasts through the wall, and he's got a giant claw, and you're like, oh my God. So that's a great visual moment, I think. Him coming out of that fire with his clothes burned off, and he's now shirtless, and he's got a huge claw for a hand. And you know that this is finally the instance where, okay, this is it. We're settling this here and now. So I think that's a really cool fight, just visually and thematically within the game overall. But the fight itself is nothing that unique. Again, you just fire away until you get a rocket launcher, and then it's over. And then I think the final fight too, like I think that's the only thing that I would say is kind of a bummer is you beat the A route of whoever you're playing, then it gives you the stinger there at the end, like, oh, you're not actually done. And then you play the B route and you get, yeah, it does.
I don't remember this stinger. I don't remember feeling an incentive to keep going.
You just see like tentacles like creaking through the train door or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like
you have to watch all the credits. You
can skip the credits too, and then it still shows it.
I don't remember this.
It's right there at the end.
I believe you. I don't recall.
It's a way to encourage you to play the B route. But once you do play the B route, you get there and you hop on the train, and it's like, oh no, we're being chased. And it's just big, large, blah monster, and you fire everything at its eye, and then that's it. So even that stinger doesn't really pay off, I think. I'm also not a huge fan of Claire's chain gun boss fight. Again, it's kind of against Birkin, the final form of Birkin there, or the pseudo final form before you eventually blow him up once and for all on a train at the very end on the B run. I think that fight's fine, I guess. I don't know. The boss fights, it's not what stands out to me the most in this game, but I don't think any of them are necessarily bad. But then again, I played all of them correctly, and so did Ricky. Like Max.
I would agree with you mostly, but I do think the first Birkin fight was really good because I like being in that small corridor.
Yeah.
And you can lose him very easily if you're playing on harder difficulties, and then like the panic of trying to find him, and there's ways for him to hide his eye. I think that's a good fight.
And it's the first time you come across anybody like that, because I don't think Mr. X has shown up at that point. Unless I am wrong. It's the first real like big baddie like that shows up in the game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so I think as a first initial boss fight within the game, it's actually pretty good and pretty intimidating in that sense.
Yeah, I agree. I like the first Birkin fight because it's a memorable environment. It's a windy little maze, and you've got a judge turning around shooting him, and it's not in the traditional sense where you can't move and shoot. Like you can move and shoot freely in this game, but there is that trade-off of stopping shooting and running away for your life, and what items do you use. That's a good one. My big beef was just the repetition of the same enemy and a lack of change in the objective of taking the boss out.
Yeah, you do make a good point that with the whole thing being Birkin is constantly mutating, and that's why he keeps coming back to life, they could have done more to make the mutations feel different.
Yeah, instead it's just more eyes. Now I have an eye on my back. Now I got one on my knee.
Mm-hmm.
I do kind of like the one where you get the chain gun though, just because I don't know.
I like chain guns.
In those games, you never feel that powerful, so giving you a chance to feel powerful is cool, even if the fight is not anything to write home about.
Well, all the Resident Evil games always do that at the end, or pretty much most of them do, where you get to the end and you've got some super mega weapon that you're using to take down the super big boss.
Yes, it's not on the level of 3, but
yeah, 3's a little different in that regard, but yeah, it's they always do a good job of that. And even the chain gun fight, again, there's nothing really unique about it, and you're just firing away, but I do like obviously getting that weapon and unloading for those 2 or 3 minutes that you do have it and you're in that fight. It's enjoyable. Let's touch on a couple other things. I think we're getting close to the point here where we'll wrap up. Did you guys have anything you wanted to say about the puzzles in the game? Anything stand out to you really in particular? I know we talked about how they were too similar across both of the playthroughs, and there wasn't enough that really, and you're just kind of doing the same things. I didn't know if there was anything specific that you guys wanted to shout out that you thought was strong, or if you thought the puzzles overall were pretty weak or anything like that.
I really hate the electronic puzzles.
Yes,
with the chess pieces.
The
circuit boards.
No. You get those little like beeping things. You have to press a button and it lights up.
Memorize the
and then you have
circle.
I hate those.
Yeah.
I hate doing those.
Well, not only that, but it's kind of underwhelming that all that's inside them is the buttons for the
spare keys.
Yeah, the spare keys for the button.
But those unlock.
I know, but it's like, ooh, this thing that they locked up in a special safe. What's inside? Key to a panel. Okay. Whatever. And I get that the actual rewards you get are then in those lockers, but it's still kind of funny.
Yeah, the puzzles. I think this probably has the least traditional puzzles so far. I think the puzzle is more the environment and how are you going to get to a place. So really, that's where it is. One thing that does change, at least in the A/B run, is the medallion puzzle up front, where whoever you're playing as the second time gets a torn page in the manual. That feels slightly cheap to me because unless there's an item I missed to pick up, I was just trying to remember what the solutions were. And I was able to remember most of it and then just brute force my way through those puzzles. But it felt weird that they just stripped the solution away from you. And it's like, well, I hope you remember what you did the last time you played.
That's not true. So what they do is instead there's a roll of film that you have to find and develop that has that is a picture, a snapshot of the panel of the Sol version of the medallion panel. And in that sense, I like that because it makes the B run, the film developing area, actually important. And I don't think it is in the A run at all, other than developing film for extra items that you can get in the lockers and things like that. The B run, I think it is actually needed that you go to the film room and develop that because you have to find out what the medallion code is to unlock it. Otherwise, I think that whole area is kind of like there's like 5 or 6 rolls of film in the whole game, and I think most of them are largely unimportant, if I remember correctly.
Well, there is the film that lets you open the hidden place in the Star's office that always gives you a gun upgrade.
That's
really
yes,
good. But that is an item, but you can't. A lot of that stuff you can find without, like, you can find the jeweled box without developing the film.
Yes,
right?
Yeah.
But you can't open that. For some reason, you just, I guess, don't see that drawer unless you've developed the film.
The hidden spot or whatever the hidden is.
Yeah, there's 2 of them.
Yeah, I agree. It's so you just brute force your way through the puzzles, and that's interesting, Max. You didn't even know that there was a roll of film in the B run that you could find.
Yeah, I just remembered like 2 of the shapes, and I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure this is what it was, and then just
no. The game is not saying, I hope you remembered what we did in the A run.
That's sure what it felt like, because I also didn't find this film that you're talking about.
Well, clearly because you wouldn't have needed to, because it's tucked away in some part of the police station that you then have to use, because that's meant to be like the last one that you get, I think, based on how you would navigate around.
I don't know. I just remember because 2 of them, the book has 1 still in there, but it's the other 2 that I brooded my way through. And I was just like, okay, here we go. But they should have been solved anyway, because Claire had done it for me in previous run. But I guess they're not concurrent events.
Is there anything else you guys want to say about some of the core elements of the Resident Evil series in this game that maybe we didn't touch on, such as just overall horror? I feel like we've touched on a little bit, or the inventory system. I don't feel like there's a lot to write home with the inventory system this time around. It's far more streamlined than normal. It's
very much like RE7's inventory system.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, except without vertically rotating, self-rotating items. It's just all horizontal lines. Didn't really ever feel too stressed about item management. Just stuffed things in item boxes and kept things pretty light and brisk. So
with that, then let's touch on music briefly. And I think incorporate, if you guys have anything else you want to say about the sound design as well, we can touch on that here. I know I mentioned it before, how great I think the sound design is in this game. Music-wise, though, there's not a lot in this game, more so than normal, if I'm recalling. I mentioned that I've been playing RE3 lately, and there actually is quite a bit of music in that game. RE2, though, I don't think there's a ton, honestly, and it really does lean heavily, more so than before, on just the sounds of these areas that you are in. And I think it creates some truly disturbing environments at times. Obviously, Mr. X stomping around, but anytime you hear a zombie go but you don't know where it's at or where it came from, that unnerves me personally, especially because a lot of the police station in particular is shrouded in darkness. so you don't know where certain things are coming from. I think this game does a great job with sound mixing and things like that. As far as the actual music, though, not a lot that I can remember. Again, the save theme stands out per usual. I think we will always mention that in all of these, but otherwise, yeah, not a lot to say on this front.
I'm a little surprised. I had a few songs I wrote down. I think the Mr. X pursuit theme lends itself into Mr. X as well. It stands out so strong. With his footsteps mixed into it, it just really is a strong pursuit theme. It's really great. I may not have liked the boss fights gameplay wise, but that Birkin fight when you are lowered down in there and then all of a sudden the choir just comes in.
Yeah.
And
I forgot about that one. Yeah.
It's so grand and just things are blowing up. The lab's going to self-destruct. It really lends itself to this over the top. It feels Japanese in that way, just grandiose, orchestrated moment. It's super great. And then I don't know if either of you, maybe in the past you have, or you did for this playthrough, but I did dabble with 2 of the bonus modes or whatever. And one of them was the 4th Survivor, which is where you play as Hunk, I think.
Oh, banger song on that, for sure.
Holy smokes, that song goes hard.
Yeah, I forgot about that one, yes.
I wrote that it has Mission Impossible vibes. Like that song. I tried the mode twice and I failed both times.
I was going to ask if you beat it. Yeah,
I did not. Shocker. The guy who tries to kill everything ran out of ammo very early. And then when he tried to run past everything, was like, this is terrible. They grab you. They all grab you. So, but I could
like this man misses his dodge roll.
For real.
I shot him in the knees. I was like dropping him down to the ground, but you get to the police station and of course they make you run through the whole stinking building. And can we just, for just a moment, we get through this police station. We're running around. We get up to the roof. I mean, I'm talking we are this close to getting to the outside and downstairs to the helicopter to finish this mission. And all of a sudden, Birkin shows up too with Mr. X literally right behind you. Like that, come on. It's
great.
Cheap. It's awful. It was so frustrating.
I don't think you escaped there though.
No, you have to get down. You have to go down the roof and out and around to the fire escape. But you're close. Like that's the close. You're very close there. But that's when Birkin shows. It's super terrible. But the music, holy cow, they go hard for Hunk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Hunk's like really. Hunk's one of those. We haven't talked about Hunk at all, but Hunk's like low key like one of the most popular Resident Evil characters amongst like hardcore fans, and he's barely. I mean, he's just got a side mode in this game, and he's shown up in a couple other things over the years, but Hunk is like really beloved for some reason. I mean, he's cool, but it's just you can play Operation Raccoon City to see more of Hunk if you're into that.
Oh. Time to look that up.
Did you have anything about the music or sound design you want to say, Ricky?
No, I just want to shout out whoever the lady is that does the zombie screaming for the ladies specifically.
Yes.
It's absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, I think the lady zombies are much spookier as well. It's like more ear shattering than the dude screams, for sure. I agree with you. Yeah, sound design across the board is
Did
immaculate.
either of you play with headphones?
No.
Oh, guys, it sounds so good. Because then
I don't like.
Then you're
that.
getting that 3D positional audio where you can really hear Mr. X in the. Oh, it's so good. You gotta play it with headphones on. It sounds.
I know that's like
captivating.
that's probably one of my like most common gaming sins is I don't play it with headphones on, but I do have a good sound bar and I have a good sound system. So
yeah,
it's not a sin. You're fine.
Yeah,
you can hear it. You got it. You're good.
All right, let's wrap up then and talk about Legacy, which I think is interesting because obviously there's a two-pronged legacy here because both the original game and the remake because we played the remake, I think let's try to talk more about the legacy of that game. I'll say this to combine both of them. I think that this game's legacy is that it was so good and so beloved that Capcom did decide to remake it 20 years later, and that the remake was everything that fans wanted it to be, and probably and more, honestly. Like I said, I think this is one of the best remakes of all time. And the fact that Resident Evil 2 this game's been out 4 years, I want to say, and I feel like it's still very relevant and still very, not relevant in the sense it's like a live service game would be or something like that. But if somebody was to ask me like, oh, what are some great games of the past 5 years that I may have missed out on? Like, this would be near the top of the list. So I'd be like, oh, are you into Resident Evil? If so, you should play Resident Evil 2. It's great. And so in that sense, I think they've really done a fantastic job of making the older era of Resident Evil still relevant here so many years later. And I think that's really cool, because a lot of older games from yesteryear, we just kind of keep them in our memories and not much else. And I think it's really cool that in this new era of Resident Evil we're in, where they're doing wild things with Resident Evil Village, and we still have these games that center around Raccoon City and Claire and Leon and stuff like that. Like, it's keeping this stuff relevant, and it's keeping the franchise accessible for new people who are looking to jump into the series and looking to discover what these games once were. I mean, with Max, for example, who's never played these before, I think it's really cool that you can jump in and get to know these characters and stuff and get to know these stories within new ways. What about yourself, Ricky?
Yeah, I mean, even outside of Resident Evil, I think this remake has pushed a lot of stuff forward. I don't think you'd get the upcoming Silent Hill remake without this being so good. Like, I think that pushed Konami to do that. I don't know if you could say the same about the Dead Space remake, but I do think I
think you can, actually. I think there was reports that was why EA did it, because not only that, sorry to cut you off, but this game sold incredibly well.
Yeah.
Like, this game sold, it wasn't just like critically acclaimed. This game, I think, pushed like 10 million copies almost.
Yeah.
So like, it showed that there's an audience who wants this.
And obviously, like, within Resident Evil right now, there's 3 and about to be 4. So they're pushing that stuff. Hopefully someday we get, I mean, I would love a 1 remake. I think most people would. Code Veronica would be a really good one to get remade. But on top of that, my hope personally is that we start to see these characters start popping up in the like mainline games again, because it's been a while since we've, even as a Leon hater, I would love to see what Leon's up to. What has he been doing? So I'm hoping we look forward in like 2 or 3 years, and this is the stuff that brought those characters back forward, because it's so popular.
Yeah.
Get rid of Ethan. I'm not get rid of Ethan.
I mean, he's gone.
I like my dead boy.
Spoilers for 8, I guess. I didn't play the Rose expansion. If you're gonna
don't say anything about the Rose stuff. But
yeah, so I like Ethan, but I definitely, these characters are like near and dear to me as the S.D. Perry reader I was as a youth.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be good to see them coming back, and I hope that that's like where the legacy takes us, I guess.
Yeah. Sorry to cut you off real quick, Max, before you share yours, and to kind of tie in with some Village stuff. I remember you and I talked, Ricky, after we both beat Village, about how we hope 9 does bring a lot of the cast members back, and that they're all old. And then they're all like mid-50s or something, and it's Chris and Leon and Jill, and they're all doing their Murtaugh thing from Lethal Weapon. I'm getting too old for this shit. Like, I think that'd be great if this is just Resident Evil 9, just all old people. Again, I guess Chris is in Village, and he doesn't look that old. But I obviously there's a time jump with Rose and stuff after that game. Right. So if you would come back to them, it would stand to reason that they would all be dealing with virus outbreaks for the better part of 30 years or something like that by that point. So I think that would be really cool if they did that too with 9.
It would be fun. Quickly, sales data for you. The game sold 4 million copies within a month. And then within a month of its initial release back in 2019, and by July of 2022, had sold over 10 million copies. So this game has sold incredibly well. It's on PS4, Xbox, and then they just did PS5 and Xbox Series console patches. There's the PC version, of course. Now it's on Switch via cloud, so it's, again, continuing that trend of accessibility with Capcom.
And this is, I mean, it's worth stressing, sorry, that like survival horror games are quite niche. Like, if you sell 5 million, that's successful within this genre. Yeah. To do 10 is like really showing there's a hunger for this type of stuff out there.
Yeah, I think it's a great first Resident Evil game for someone to play. I think it's an improvement over Resident Evil 1, just as far as accessibility and like scope and excitement. There's just more going on there. But this game, Resident Evil 2, is so important to Capcom, both in its original release and this modern remake, right? The original game came out in an era where Capcom wanted every sequel to be bigger and better than the first game. And that led to great results, but a lot of hard work. You know, we touched on it up in the rundown, but Hideki Kamiya was the director on this game originally, right? And he would go on, he's the guy over at Platinum, right?
Yes.
Yeah, like, so he goes on to make Devil May Cry, which was birthed out of Resident Evil 4 development, and then he comes on to Platinum, and he's doing Bayonetta and all that stuff. So we've got this great legacy and this super strong sequel that really builds up the world of Resident Evil. And then we get this remake, which we talked in our Resident Evil 7 episode about the importance of the RE engine, but this continued the trend of Capcom just re-releasing their games. But there's pressure here. Resident Evil 2 was precious at this time and is to this day. And we get this remake that really goes all out and makes this awesome game that reimagines the gameplay mechanics into modern third-person shooter type controls and just design. And it looks great and it feels like it's what you want out of a remake. And now we're getting ready to go into that again with Resident Evil 4, which I would argue is the next most beloved, if not more beloved, in the grand populace of Resident Evil. And whatever shakes out with that remake here, it started here with this RE2 remake. And so it's so important to the franchise and to Capcom. So it's a game that we're going to treasure for a long time, I think, and will be talked about and discussed and is influential for years and years to come, like it has been for the past 20 something years.
Yeah, to just add one more thing, like when this game came out too, I think RE7 was such a hit that it was like a surprise, like, and got people thinking like, okay, I think Resident Evil is coming back. I think we're on an upswing here. And this game really just reaffirmed that. Like, this game cemented that, no, Capcom is like back at the top of their game. Resident Evil is indeed once again a franchise that we can talk about positively and be excited about looking forward. And not only that, but I did want to stress that like remakes have been part of Capcom's DNA and part of Resident Evil's DNA going back to 2001. So like the fact that we knew years before RE2 released that they were supposedly working on this, and that alone generated excitement. I remember that. Being excited to hear that Capcom was once again going to remake an older Resident Evil game, because they had obviously done that previously with RE1. So for them to come back and do it again with this, and it's obviously much different than the RE1 remake that came out over 20 years ago. But it again just shows that Capcom, when they do remake these games that are a little bit older, they know what they're doing and they treat them with the care that they deserve, and they also know what fans want from them.
And I think that does it for Resident Evil 2. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to find more episodes of Chapter Select, you can head over to chapterselect.com, check out previous seasons and whatnot. There you can follow the show at Chapter Select. If you'd like, you can follow Logan on Twitter at Moreman12 and his writing over at comicbook.com. You can follow Ricky on Twitter at Ricky Frech and his work over at GamePer. And then if you'd like, you can follow myself on Twitter at MaxRoberts143 and my writing over at maxfrequency.net. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, adios. Chapter Select is a Max Frequency production. This episode was researched, produced, and edited by me, Max Roberts. Season 5 is hosted by Logan Moore and myself. Season 5 is all about Resident Evil. For more on the season, go to chapterselect.com/season 5. Follow the show at Chapter Select and check out previous seasons at chapterselect.com.